Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another one of my Dota 2 hero guides. Today we're going to be taking a look at Lifestealer. So Lifestealer is a carry hero who's really all about being tanky, out-healing and out-sustaining enemies while wearing them down over prolonged engagements. He's really the opposite of a carry like PA or Ursa, where those carries focus on doing a lot of damage in quick bursts. Lifestealer focuses more on a methodical approach of whittling heroes down and healing himself with every attack. Also, one of the other unique aspects of Lifestealer is that he has a built-in BKB as one of his abilities, Rage. And this allows him to skip the item altogether while still benefiting from that immunity, which is like a get-out-of-jail-free card where you can BKB TP, or obviously you can BKB in the middle of a fight and not get affected by slows or stuns and stick on the target and kill them. But then he can also even buy BKB and benefit from that as well. So you can have Rage, BKB, and then Rage again to benefit from this insane and absurd amount of immunity that just makes him very, very hard to bring down. But before we can understand how to play Lifestealer, we have to take a look at his abilities. So now that we understand Lifestealer in general, we can take a look at his abilities and see how he's able to be that good sustained carry like I talked about. So first we're going to take a look at Rage, and this ability is one I already mentioned, and it's the BKB ability, and basically you just press it and you go into a Rage, and then you can't be affected by stuns or slows. You do take some magic damage, but it's not very much, so I wouldn't consider that to be a big threat. And this is great for obviously being able to stick on targets in fights and hit them because they can't slow you, they can't stun you, they can't do really anything to you, or if you're farming on the map, you can get out of sticky situations either by running away after you press Rage or pressing Rage and then TPing back to base. The one thing I will say about this though is obviously because it's an ability and not an item, you can't press it while you're silenced. So just keep that in mind. It's not like you get this free dispel for a silence when you have Rage. So silences can counter this hero a little bit more than in other situations on other heroes just because of that. So just be wary of, if some mid laner like a Storm is buying Orchid first, that can be a pretty big threat to a hero like Lifestealer. Next, we have Open Wounds, and this ability is also pretty straightforward. You just click it on an enemy, and then they are pretty slowed, and this allows you to stick on them and right-click them and chase them down, which is obviously really good. It's a little bit of a control spell. But if you didn't know, and I'll mention this more when I talk about the passive and the facets, Lifestealer automatically gets lifesteal on his right-clicks, just as a passive. So when I'm clicking the axe here, I'm obviously lifestealing every time I attack him, but then if I apply Open Wounds, not only is he slowed, but now I'm getting even more lifesteal when I attack the axe. So that's obviously really, really good because when you have this on a target, it's hard for them to run away. You're not really going to get kited, and now you're sustaining a ton. So if you're battling 1v1 versus somebody and they have Open Wounds on them, it's going to be very, very hard for them to out damage your lifesteal, especially once you have more items, because right now I have no items, and you can see that's significant lifesteal just with no items and just max Open Wounds. Then lastly, for normal abilities, we have Ghoul Frenzy, and this is a pretty straightforward ability. We have move speed and attack speed bonus every time you level it, and you're probably going to be getting this early on in the game because it's just great for the lane and scaling well into the later portion of the game with that attack speed. And the only other big thing to say about this is that they've changed Ghoul Frenzy a bunch. They've changed his hero's abilities a bunch in recent years, but overall, the hero still does kind of the same thing even when they tweak it here and there. But that's Ghoul Frenzy, pretty good straightforward ability and a great passive to have, especially early on, that scales. And then lastly, the ultimate of this hero is Infest, and I have both Lifestealer and this allied axe at low HP just to show you how this works, because basically what you do is you just click it on an allied hero or a creep. It could be an enemy creep or an allied creep, and you basically go inside of them, you infest them, and when you do that, you heal the ally that you go inside. So this can be good for a burst heal, and you also regen extremely quickly, so this can be good if you're low HP and you're trying to get out of a sticky situation. You go into that creep and then you run away, or you go into that ally and then they run away, they're healed, all that kind of stuff. And then when you burst out, which, let's get this axe close to the other one, you can press R and burst out. You also do damage in this AoE. So it's also good for getting a little bit of extra damage in an AoE, let's say at the very end of a fight or the very end of a gank, and you want to get that little bit of extra damage in on the enemy. So it's a great ability for survival. Obviously you have Rage, which is good for that too. So you can see how with the passive lifesteal, with the Rage, with the lifesteal on Open Wounds and the slow, with the Infest into allies and creeps, this hero is very, very difficult to bring down because you have that built-in BKB, you have that lifesteal, and you have that get out of jail free card with Infest. Then lastly, I'll talk about the Ags and the Shard. And the Shard is just when you have that explosion from Infest in an AoE, any enemy in that AoE gets open wounds applied to them for 50% of the duration. I don't really have to show you that. It's pretty straightforward. And they've also kind of changed this and introduced different shards here and there. So it's not really one I want to focus on. But Ags is extremely good. And this is a great upgrade for Infest as well, because you can actually go into an enemy offensively. Instead of just being defensive or in a creep, you can actually go into the enemy offensively, and then you attack them while you're in there. You still regen and they're disarmed. So this is really, really good as an offensive tool, and it still helps you sustain and regen even when you're getting low, or let's say rage goes down, you can go into the enemy and then you can rage again once you come out, or open wounds, that kind of stuff. It just adds another dynamic to this hero. You just need to be a little bit careful, because you don't want to go inside the enemy and then they run back to the team and then you just get, you know, in the 5 enemies or in the fountain or something like that, and then you die. So it can be a way you can grief yourself. So you do have to be a little bit careful of that, but it can be a great offensive potential, you know, weapon, especially against heroes like maybe Slark or other heroes that like to have mobility and try to get away from you. You can just go inside them, and then there's not really much that they can do about that. And as for this hero's passive and facets, I already kind of mentioned the passive a little bit, because you get lifesteal on all of your right clicks just innately. But the other thing you get from this passive is you get max health as damage, which makes you really, really good against tanky heroes, because now you're just doing a percentage of their HP every time you right click them. And you also get bonus HP, just a buff to your HP overall every time you kill a creep or a hero. So that can be great for obviously increasing your HP pool and making you even tankier. So you can see how this hero is very, very good at being a sustain hero, life stealing just innately, and then also getting even more HP, and then also being kind of an anti-tank hero in a lot of ways as well. Then moving on to the facets, we have Flesh Feast, and this facet is the one that most people are picking these days. And basically, you get more HP per hero kill, and then also open wounds is refreshed if a unit dies while affected by it. So that's the one people are mostly going for. This other Gore Storm facet just makes your Infest do a little bit more damage, and you can also infest Ancient Creeps, but right now this is not the most popular one. It's the one that they just introduced in the most recent patch. And now that we understand Lifestealer's abilities, we can jump into a game and see how he's played. Lifestealer's laning stage is really all about sustaining, and honestly, that's just the story of the hero in general. As we've been saying, his name is Lifestealer, and he's really all about lifestealing. So in the lane, that's no different. Hitting creeps, hitting enemies, you're going to win trades over the course of the lane, and you can get a value point in both rage and open wounds to be survivable in a lot of situations, or even aggressive if you need to slow the enemy and stick on them and all that kind of stuff. But his main weakness is really early on in the lane, because you're probably going to be getting your passive level 1, and that doesn't really do a lot for you. Yes, you can move a little faster. Yes, you attack a little bit, but in certain lanes, the enemy can really take advantage of your early levels being a lot weaker. It's not until later in the game, later in the lane, that you start to get a lot stronger and a lot harder to deal with, and the enemy really has to start retreating, and you can get way more aggressive. And this is also why the main focus on Lifestealer should be to win your lane, because there are going to be matchups, like I said, where you struggle at least early on, but if you're smart enough and you're careful enough, you will be able to kind of out-sustain them over the course of the first few minutes, and then hit your power spikes and really be able to dominate the lane and push the enemy out of the lane if you know what you're doing and you're able to really take advantage of his strengths. Then, as the laning stage starts to break down, Lifestealer really prefers to protect his tower and farm around his safe lane. He doesn't really want to get booted out of his lane and have to retreat somewhere else, because he's one of the best heroes at just sticking in an area and surviving in that area and farming in that area, because obviously he has his ult, he has his rage, he has all these tools to just sustain and be hard to gank and hard to kill. Sure, you can participate with your team at this point sometimes, or maybe you can push a tower here and there, but that's really not his strength. He doesn't do a lot of that until he gets a few items. It's more about just sticking in an area, sticking in your lane, protecting your lane, being hard to gank, and just farming until you hit your few item timing. And then that really is Lifestealer's big timing, is his 2 or 3 item timing. It's really when he wants to start participating in the game, because usually he gets some kind of farming item or two, and then, you know, he gets into his more survivable or more aggressive items and that kind of stuff, whether it's a Basher, Ags, maybe even BKB. And in the ideal game, once you hit this timing around 20, 25 minutes, whatever it is, that's when you're going to start, you know, participating with your team, pushing towers, hopefully getting Roche, getting Aegis, and just sieging the map and really closing off the map for the enemy and being extremely hard to deal with. But obviously every game is not going to be the ideal game or the perfect game for Lifestealer. So how do we play him in those kind of not so great games or situations where we're falling behind? Well, the best thing to do with Lifestealer is take advantage of his strengths, which is his ability to kind of be on the map in otherwise dangerous positions and then BKB TPing out. Now, you do have to be careful about that if you're against like an Axe or a Pudge or any other BKB piercing stun. But if you are in a situation where they don't have any BKB piercing stun or they don't have a basher on the enemy carry, you can really take advantage of being aggressive, pushing lanes, and then BKB TPing out if you know they come and try to kill you, because that can make a lot of space for your team. It can really prolong the game in a big way so that you can end up coming back and then, you know, really preparing for that defense if you are on the back foot. Now, in terms of team fighting, Lifestealer is really all about knowing when to press Rage and knowing when to press his ultimate. Rage is obviously similar to BKB, like we've talked about, but the only real difference is that you can't press it when silenced, so you do need to be careful if, like, Storm has an Orchid or there's some other silence in the game, because that can really be the big difference between whether or not you purchase BKB or some other Dispel on your own, or you just rely on Rage and then you know when to press that. And then also, some games, you don't really need to press Rage to hit enemies because they don't have a lot of lockdown. They don't have a lot of slows or stuns or other things like that. But then some games, they have a ton of lockdown, they have a ton of slows, and if you don't press Rage, you're going to get kited. So you really have to be wary of what the matchups are, what the situation is in the game, because you don't want to be pressing Rage too early and then blowing it and then getting stun locked and chain stunned and die, but you also don't want to be in a situation where you have to press Rage to hit and you only have that one Rage. That's really when you're going to need BKB the most. You can do Rage, BKB, and then Rage again afterwards, and maybe ultimate mixed in there a little bit as well. And then in terms of using your ultimate, you do have to be wary of using it too aggressively in some certain situations, because yes, you can use it aggressively on the enemy if you have an Ags, or you can even use it on an ally to initiate a gank. Like if you have a Slardar or some other hero like a Storm, you can get inside them, they can initiate, and then you can burst out. But then you have to be careful because you don't have it for that regen that you might need in the fight if you're getting low and you don't have Rage or something else like that. The other way you can also use it is on an ally if they're getting initiated on and they're getting bursted. You can use that for a burst of heal there as well, but again, you need to be a little bit careful with that because now you don't have it for yourself. So you really need to be thinking about, do I need my ultimate for a defensive capability for myself, or can I use it more aggressively or to save a teammate? And that really depends on matchups and depends on the very situation, because sometimes you're the one that's relied on to do a lot of damage to frontline, to do all these things, and you really need to be thinking about yourself. Sometimes in other games, the enemy can't really deal with you, so they're going to try to kill everyone else, and in those situations you need to use it more aggressively or more defensively for your teammates and not necessarily just selfishly for yourself. But really, there aren't any great simple shortcuts for when to use Rage or when to use Infest, because they're very situationally dependent, matchup dependent, or state of the game and timing dependent spells. And really, these two abilities are the most difficult aspects of the hero. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. You just hit towers, hit enemies, whittle them down over time while sustaining through it all and being very tanky and hard to deal with. And that, everyone, is my Lifestealer guide. If you liked the video or found it helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.